say about you or the quarterback, or in fact, you're the CEO of your own business. Whatever analogy works. The point being is, you're going to win together. And one of the things that we wanted to use today to is kind of talk about the process of how influencers prepare to engage in a deal. If you remember, influencers are helping these companies redefine themselves in some cases, or improve their competitiveness, but they're working on a 3 to 5 year vision. And so you don't just call up and say, hey, you feel like changing. They do a lot of pre-work and intelligence gathering, and actually Will's going to interview them, because we're fortunate to have Will now as an Epicor employee, but he's going to interview Eric Kimberling of Third Stage, who I think you all know, and John Gross of Epicor about their process to understand a deal, so that when you engage, you're literally on point and you're immediately advancing that agenda. And what we've done is we're going to align it with the tools that already exist. Many of them are lens tools, so that you can see how we're supporting you in this kind of higher level engagement. So it's going to be super important for the K&A sellers, but as you can imagine, there's a lot of value if you have a strategic account. Because as Lisa talked today, you're never done with a strategic account. You're constantly selling and reselling. So with no further ado, Will?
Hello. I originally was going to be asked to be on the panel when I was still a consultant. But now, since I'm an employee, I guess I'll introduce myself as the VP of Professional Services within distribution. Been here a solid 3 weeks. Came over from West Monroe, where I had a strategic relationship with Epicor, amongst a number of other ERP entities. And so, today's conversation, we're going to go through and talk about, one, what we do. I think there's some misconception about what exactly us influencers are, what we're supposed to be. And then we're going to go through that prep conversation about how to engage those customers, win bigger, better deals, and then talk about some of the experiences we've had with Epicor in front of us as a part of the selection processes, and some things that have gone well and some that haven't. I am also joined by John Gross and Eric Kimberling, and I'm going to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves. Go ahead.
So I'm Eric Kimberling, I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting, and Third Stage is an independent tech-agnostic consulting firm that helps clients select and implement ERP systems. We help a lot of our clients with the selection process, but a lot of our clients have already selected software, whether it be Epicor or another system, and they'll ask us to help with the implementation along the way.
Hey, good afternoon everyone. I'm John Gross, Managing Director of Epicor, and like Eric's firm, Epicor is an independent client-side advisory and consulting firm. Been in business since '78, largely working with manufacturing and distribution companies, helping them figure out what the future looks like, what to do from a corporate structure perspective, from a business process improvement perspective, and put together strategic technology roadmaps and help them execute those roadmaps, and that may involve the acquisition of new systems, the implementation of systems, and so on and so forth.
And one thing that's also important to note is with Third Stage, Aaron Ford won PT coupling, and with Epicor on the distribution side there was Swish, there was also VMEC, and John, was there another one with you with Epicor?
On the manufacturing side, Low and Windows.
Right, Low and Windows, thank you. So yes, and all of those were 7-figure deals, and so we really wanted to, so the people who are working with these big clients with big transformations, let's hear how they do it. Will?
So first and foremost, we really wanted to talk about some more information about what these firms kind of do. I had an Epicor employee once say to me, well, you're just a selection consultant, and he said, don't be made mad about this. Of course I was mad. And I had to do some education about what we exactly do. And so I wanted to give Eric and John an opportunity to talk about some of the services they provide outside of just selection. John, you started with some of that information. Go ahead and give us a little bit more.
Yeah, so when we work with our clients, let me give a broad brush of what we do. So we come in and we do digital strategies and requirements assessments. We have an M&A practice where we're helping private equity clients and large multinationals do due diligence on potential acquisitions and then post-acquisition integration work. We were born, our company was born out of a philosophy that the client needs someone on their side of the table to successfully drive these implementations to successful outcomes. So one of the key things that we do that's interwoven in our process is making sure they are planning and architecting an implementation project that's going to deliver the business results. And so we'll get into, I think, a little bit more detail in a bit.
Yeah, so by the time we get to selection, it sounds like you've already been embedded for a significant amount of time with these customers.
That's right.
And so, Eric, when you're looking at it from your perspective, I'm guessing you do a lot of those things as well. But third stage has kind of moved the needle in regards to social media and its usage, and it's kind of getting some more, arm out there with some of that data and some of that information you're putting out. Tell us about how successful you've been using that.
Well, when I started the company in 2018, that was the sole source of incoming leads was YouTube and LinkedIn. Those are the two primary channels. So putting content out there that was agnostic, disruptive. Sometimes I say things in this content where it's not popular, it's not mainstream thinking, but it's the way I see the world. And so we would just put this content out there, and the algorithms would pick it up, and it would get pushed out to people that would then reach out to us and contact us saying they wanted help with their selection process or their overall implementation. So it's been highly effective, and it's also been a good way for us to stay on top of trends in the industry, understanding what the different vendors are doing, understanding the roadmaps, because as content creators as well, we want to make sure that we're being accurate and accurately reflecting where the vendors are headed.
Interestingly enough, since I've been a participant on one of your channels and seen myself and had some reach out, I've seen some of that firsthand, right? And some of that reach that we've gotten into the market has been a little bit further. Some previous clients I've had reached out to me like, hey, I saw you on Eric Kimberly's page. You must be doing something well. Appreciate that. So now that we know what we're doing and what our firms kind of do, talk about what we do when we look at prospective clients and ones that we've just closed and that initial conversation. What kind of things do you do in order to get prepped for that? What kind of tools you use? What kind of software packages or things you get on the internet that you use in order to have those conversations? What would you first?
Well, first of all, a lot like Jonathan and PEMCO, we generally first understand what the current situation is. What is this company doing today? What's made them successful? How have they grown and gotten where they are today? It's really easy to sort of forget about that and just look to the future, which I think is software vendors, sometimes that's what is the line of thinking. But for us, it's important to understand how they got to where they are, what their strengths are, and what they're trying to improve, and why they're going through this process. Why are they considering Epicor? Why are they considering Epicor's competitors? And so really just understanding that first and foremost and helping the clients prioritize so they don't get caught up in analysis paralysis. They don't try to boil the ocean. They don't try to find that perfect solution that doesn't exist. They're focused on the things that are most important to them as an organization strategically. So that's what we do to start. It really has nothing to do with Epicor or even the tools we use. It's more just understanding the business of the client. Once we do that, then we bring in tools that we use. So we've got our own internal knowledge base of experience having helped implement Epicor products as well as other systems. But we also use technology evaluation centers. We license their technology to use that as part of our selection process. We've got that quantitative data set to augment our qualitative experience. And then obviously the RFP process is a big part of it as well, just making sure we get a tailored solution for the client.
So you guys are already engaged, but what do you do when they initially call? How do you know who you're talking to? How do you know it might not be somebody who's tasked to do this and just as a tick list item, or who actually is substantially making change? How do you profile that account prior to you actually legitimately engaging? Because obviously, is it LinkedIn that you'd use? Do you look at their social media histories? How do you know if you're working with somebody who's legit and whether they're there to make change or just somebody in purchasing?
I'm going to jump in here because from a private equity perspective, I first look at who owns who, right? I want to know, from that private equity entity, all the portfolios that sit there, what their kind of lean is, whether or not it's manufacturing, whether or not they invest a lot in distribution, and then see, how long they've been held, when they can be up for sale, et cetera. So I want to get a lot of that information about what kind of M&A related activity could be on the horizon for that entity. So just wanted to jump in with that. Go ahead.
No, I think that's a great point.
Yeah, when we get started, so this is before we're engaged, we're talking about how do we build a profile of a client, a potential client, how do we make sure we're talking to the right people. So when we're selling our services, One of the things we have to think about is what we're selling and to whom. We're talking about a strategic digital transformation project. So in some cases, the folks who are reaching out to us, we know are going to perhaps report up into someone, may not move the needle. Sometimes we get that, but we've got to find a way to talk to the right people in the organization. So we are building that profile, and yes, we have LinkedIn, we have other tools to build out the relationship map. I was just in a session not too long ago where the team was doing that for strategic accounts, not that dissimilar. So if it's private equity owned, if it's corporate owned, who are the key decision makers, who do we have connections with in the C-suite. We try to build out a preliminary view of the buying committee and try to open up doors in various ways. We have certain automation tools that we're leveraging to help us do that so we can do it at scale as opposed to one-off, and then when we get bites, then we can kind of engage in a little bit more of a personal manner. But the goal is to make sure that when we're invited in for a sales presentation to present the methodology, people already have a sense of how we can help them. Yes, it's a little bit about us, but it's also, or I'd say it's probably more about them and understanding their pain points and their key drivers, at least at a very, very high level. And if we can establish that rapport, it's a real kind of breakdown of barriers to having a better discussion about their pain points, for them to open up a little bit more. And the more they can open up with us, the more we can listen up front, the more we can come in and build a tailored proposal. And that's really, really important, because we're not selling widgets like perhaps they might be doing. We're selling a service.
Eric, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would add too, in addition to what John said, which were great points, I would also add that we also look at the digital maturity of the organization too. We want to understand just sort of where they at technologically. Are they on an older version of Epicor, or are they using an old green screen homegrown system? Not that really changes a lot in terms of how we approach it, but it does approach or change or influence how they select software and what you can expect from a risk perspective in the implementation. So we do look at that piece of it. We also look at what experience the organization has going through these sorts of projects in the past. I used to think the opposite of this, but having done this for a while now, I find that the scariest client to me is the one that hasn't been through this before. They just don't have any battle wounds. They've never been burned before, even if it's individually at a previous company. If you have a team that's green and has never been through it, it's just really hard to educate them on what we see all the time and what you've seen in your consulting career. And so that part is important too.
Well, and just to add to that too, there's also some of that buying dynamic behavior relative to micro vertical. Like med device, they want a demo within, from our perspective, once we see them, they want a demo within that week, and everybody's got advanced degrees, and it's fast. Whereas you might be dealing with an industrial manufacturer, and they're comfortable with, scheduling and discovery, but there's some culturalisms relative to the micro vertical that also can be incorporated as you prep and so that you align on a culture element.
It was interesting as well when John and I were preparing for the session. We noticed that Epicor had significant access to a lot of these tools, right? Zoom Info, and DMV Hoovers, and I'm looking at the slides because there's a lot of them, right? PitchBook, etc. Have you used any of those tools in the past, and what kind of information did you glean from them?
Yeah, we use comparable tools. In some cases, Epicor has access to resources we'd love to have access to. So, building out a demographic profile, understanding the technographic information, so what technologies they have, what technologies perhaps folks on the buying committee have experience with in the past, I think from your perspective is important, and that stuff you have access to. I do want to kind of bounce a little bit to something you mentioned before. When your prospects are working with Third Stage or with Pemico, I think it's important to understand the legwork that's been done before you're engaged. And so we will have come in and studied the business from head to toe, how they're currently doing things, their maturity, their business processes, the state of their data, and we put together on paper a view of the future. What do the processes look like? Am I going to combine entities? What do my central services look like? How's my manufacturing process going to look in the future? How's my accounting going to look in the future? And we're putting together that kind of future state, the path to get to the future state, and putting together an ROI analysis that actually looks at the benefits that are achievable. So if you can get the information from our consulting team, our consulting teams, from the client, if you can get the information from the tools that Lynn has access to and map them in the Salesforce mapping tool, now you're starting to build a profile of the buying committee and the things that are going to be important for them for decision making. So when you come into a demo, you're going to be asked to demonstrate order to cash, procure to pay, plan to produce, record to report value streams. But if you've got an inkling as to what's going to move the needle strategically, that's where you're going to drill in. And it may also even give you an opportunity to say, you know, something that's strategic for them is perhaps a gap for us. We need to think long and hard about whether we're going to continue to invest resources here.
You said a couple of really good things there. One of them that you didn't say, though, is that us consultants up here are not the enemy. We are a tool to be used by any of your sales teams to say, hey, they have a lot of information about the client. Let's go mine that data that they have in order to get some good information from them. Eric, turning to you for a second. When we're looking at taking all that information in, now we got those things, we've talked to the consultant, we've used all that background information. How do we then create a winning strategy from all of that? Give me some examples of what you've been able to do in the past, taking it in and mining all that data and then giving something that makes sense for the client.
Well, our job is to make make you all look good. I mean, if you can come in and demo the product and it matches what the client's expectations are, what their priorities are, what their goals are, that just positions Epicor better than if you didn't do that. So really just collaborating with each other is really important. And that's one thing I think we pride ourselves on is we're not, to your point, we're not the enemy. We've got a lot of information and knowledge of the client. We don't know everything, but we know a lot at this point, so we can help you position yourself better. And quite frankly, I mean, Epicor has been one of the better, if not the best, honestly, at demoing products to our clients. I mean, they have an extremely high win rate, and I think a big part of that is because of the fact that I don't know what it is about Epicor's culture, but culturally, it just seems like the account reps want to collaborate with us. They're not as adversarial. They're not viewing us as the enemy. They're not trying to get us out of the way. They recognize that we have a good relationship with the client for a reason, and so they sort of embrace that, and I think it pays dividends in the deals that they go on with us.
John, anything to add to that?
No, I echo what Eric said there. It's important to pick our brains early and often and figure out what the key levers are in the process to demonstrate that, yeah, your software is the right software, but perhaps just as importantly, in some cases more importantly, that you're the right business partner for them strategically for the next 10, 15, now 20 years now that we're thinking about cloud. And so you're going to get deep into feature function, you're going to get deep into technical, but how do you bring it back to what's important for the client? And so what's important? The feature function stuff is table stakes. Can you hit their strategic requirements? Can you elevate their competitive differentiators using their tool, using your tools, so that they can continue to do what they do best even better? How do you align with them strategically from an executive perspective? I think Epicor does this better than many of your competitors in the marketplace, showing that you have executive alignment. And I think perhaps more today, Eric, you probably agree with this, Will, you too, when you're on the other side of the table. Clients are more now concerned with how are you going to deliver that vision? How are you going to make them successful? And so what we're seeing compared to perhaps 5 or 6 years ago today is that the clients want some measure of satisfaction that you're going to get them across the finish line to that value, perhaps better than the competitors, and that when things get hard, and things get hard, let's not sugarcoat it, things are going to go wrong, that you're going to be there to support them and work through the issues.
Yeah.
So this next topic we're going to talk about, if I was actually on the panel, I'd have a whole lot to say. And we wanted to have a little bit of teeth in this conversation around what has Epicor done well, or they haven't done well in regards to using win themes and whatnot in some of the sales cycles. So I wanted to ask you both, give me some examples of when you've seen them do very well, some concrete ones, and some times where they may have come up a little bit short. John, we'll start with you.
All right, so we're gonna start off with what Epicor does well. So again, I think I mentioned a second ago the relationship side of things. When given an opportunity, it's an opportunity you should seek out. Is really trying to build that type of executive level relationship. And if you're competing against some of the more bureaucratic, hierarchical competitors where they're not going to get an executive presence, and if we're talking about enterprise accounts here or even mid-market accounts, you have the ability to do that, and it is a big, big differentiator that has perhaps had Epicor win deals where maybe you were a little bit behind on, and maybe in some areas you were a little bit weaker. The thing is, our clients are looking at multiple facets in their due diligence. They're, yes, looking at features and functions and technical and the total cost of ownership, among other things. They're also looking at relationship. And so that is something that Epicor does really, really well. And I think Eric mentioned it a second ago, demonstration, telling the story. And the more you can articulate that story in terms of the 5 or 6 key value drivers for the client, the better you're going to fare. And so you may be asked to show a bazillion and one things, and I think Eric said it well. What are the things that are going to move the needle? How do we avoid the spin cycle? How do you say, hey, we're going to keep you focused? You may be asking me about TMS, and you may be asking me about all this peripheral stuff that doesn't align with the strategic driver. We'll show it to you, but you know what? We're going to be a partner here. We're going to tell you, you actually don't need it. And maybe they're going to need it in year 2, maybe they're going to need it in year 3, but how do you stay on target, and how do you try to push this thing to an efficient close? Now, I'll quickly just talk about things that perhaps can be improved, and then pass it over to Eric.
You want to drop that hot potato?
I'm going to drop that hot potato.
I will say though, I want to be uncomfortable. We're never going to use any names, but I think we all we all can agree we learn more from our losses than we do from our wins. Our wins are kind of the end zone dance. It's awesome. Whoop for you. Losses is where we can kind of really recommit to our craft and continue to be better. So I really want you to feel okay. We're not going to call anybody out, but to talk specifically about some things you see, because really, that's all we ask for is the opportunity to be better.
So I'm going to give one example, but it's one example of many, and Will and I had a discussion last week, and he brought up examples of this. So this is something that is not a one-off here. So this is a really large company, and they have business units that are more of your conventional pure-play distributor. They have engineer-to-order, project-based business units. They have assemble-to-order, make-to-forecast type of business units as well. And Epicor was invited to the party and presented a concept that stitched together Kinetic and Profit 21. This is a really sophisticated company. And so it became clear pretty quickly that this wasn't something that architecturally made a whole lot of sense. And I suspect Epicor spent a lot of time and pre-sale money trying to piece this thing together. And we'd seen this a couple other times as well. So I think one of the hard things to do, especially when something is so darn big with such huge dollar signs attached, is say, probably want to take a pass on this one. And so I think having a bit of discipline there and really understanding kind of that high level fit and how you can drive strategic value and whether you have something that's compelling is important.
Yeah, and just adding to that, I'll start the opposite direction since you finished with the things that can be improved. I would agree with you that knowing what product you're leading with or what products you're leading with and making sure that we're all aligned on that and that it makes sense is important. Knowing when to pursue a project and when not to is important, because there are times where I think, a sales rep, so we see it all over the industry, you get a little hungry and you want to just pursue everything. And there's times where it makes more sense to back out and say, it's just not a good fit. Or I know I'm up against vendor A, and vendor A is probably going to win this, or they've got a better offering than we do for this particular client. So I think that's a big part of it. But I also think sometimes Epicor on the sales side, I think gets a little bit outgunned with some of the bigger enterprise accounts. Like if you're up against Oracle, for example, Oracle will come in and say, hey, we've got a fully integrated product, and Epicor's piecing together products over here. The reality is they're all piecing together products to some degree. Oracle, SAP, those guys are all piecing together different things and trying to call it one solution. So I think just being able to respond to that a little bit more aggressively would help Epicor. I haven't recently seen Epicor lose a deal because of that, but in my past career I have. And I'd say the only other thing I can say about things that Epicor could do better is more, not so much on the sales side up front and the product side, it's more on the services side. And I think this is something that predates the current leadership team, the current private equity ownership, some stuff that happened 10, 15 years ago with the company where they sort of gutted the services organization, and now they're doing the opposite. They're bringing in people like you and really trying to build that up. So I think just recognizing that it's a transition that it seems like you guys are going through to build up that professional services side of things to make the process more successful, I think that will go a long way.
Can I jump in on that? I think that's a really important point. You okay with that?
Go right ahead.
All right. So on the services side, service gets brought in at a certain point in the process to prepare some type of plan and scope of work. So we're going to talk here kind of mid-market and up, right? Let's call it 200 million and up. Now, Epicor, so if you're running sales deals, I think you want to be sensitive to how service comes in and whether it's representing an implementation plan that is going to lead to a successful outcome. When you think about companies that are 200 million plus, they have the pockets to support the consulting that's required. And one of the things that has come up a few times, and we've encouraged Epicor to go back and load the plan appropriately with enough hours and enough time. The worry in the mid-market and up accounts isn't so much, is this going to cost me a boatload of money? The worry is, do we have enough horsepower to do this thing right? So I think if you're going to have some type of eye on the services component before this thing gets across the finish line, talk to Third Stage, talk to Pemico. We will have done an implementation analysis, get our views before something is presented to the client. Hey, does this work? Is the phasing accurate? Do we have enough pilot phases? Do we have the right consulting horsepower to drive through this? What do the teams look like and so forth?
Yeah.
Can I just add really quickly too? That also applies for what the solution you're going to present. They're open for you doing a preview of, okay, you talked about something stitched together. Do you think this is going to fly? And they're going to be honest, because at the end of the day, they own the relationship with the client, and it behooves everybody to put something forward that looks good. So if it doesn't look good, they're not going to say, oh yeah, good, nice job. No, they're going to tell you that dog isn't going to hunt. So I wanted to add to that. I'm sorry, Will.
I'm going to tell a story about Epicor losing on price and not in the way you think, right? So, and I will tell the opposite story about how you won on price, but I had to help with that one. So the idea is that if you have a third party that's doing the selection, the likelihood is, as John said, there's pockets, there's spin here, right? There's generally a significant amount of need for hand-holding and assistance throughout the implementation process. Well, there's been a few times where I've received, as the selection consultant, as we were called before, bids where you are 4 to 5 times less expensive than our enterprise cohorts, right? So a $3 billion deal from Microsoft and a $500,000 deal from Epicor. Now you would think you're ahead there. You would think that is a good thing. Unfortunately, it is not. And the reason it isn't is because the complexity of the deal and the implementation isn't showing through in your bid, right? So if they thought, the competitors thought that it was a 12,000-hour deal and you thought it was a 4,000-hour deal, obviously we're not seeing the same level of complexity. Maybe you're not understanding their business. Maybe you didn't do all the prep-related stuff that we talked about to understand where they're coming from and what those strategic drivers are, right? And so once that gets exposed to the client, unfortunately, you've already lost the deal because they don't think you understand who and what they are, right? And that's happened to me on 2 different occasions. On the time you won, and I got smart at this point, I had the conversation prior to and said, hey, you probably want to make an increase in the number of hours and the complexity here. Let's have a conversation about it. So not only did I come to the table, the person listened to me and heard that they should probably come and think about that differently. And in that case, yes, they tripled their hours. It's a big success. It's a very difficult implementation, but we won together. Long story short, you can lose on price if you are too cheap. And the reason that is because you just don't show that you understand what they are.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, and that's something we've seen success with some Epicor clients that had already selected Epicor, and then we are now collaborating with Epicor on the services side to help them be successful in the implementation. We're not here to replace what Epicor does. Obviously, you guys are the experts in software, but we are good at program management, change management, helping redefine refine business processes, helping with the architecture and integration. So really finding ways that you can collaborate with a Pemico or Third Stage or another independent agnostic consulting firm that can help complete the solution and complete the offering that's going to make them referenceable and make them want to buy more software in the future.
And let's also own executive accountability, because they've engaged financially these three firms at considerable sum in some cases, and having those executives follow through and commit to the project and recommit is something that they can add, which is so critical, because so often you get, we're going to be taller, faster, taller, richer, better looking, and then the executives go off to whatever it is they are, expecting the troops to roll it out, when in fact, no, those executives need to stay in the process and make sure everybody knows it's the strategic direction and that the whole company is driving that way, and they have that relationship and can yank them back in when needed. And it's an equally important part. Because the change management, I'm sure you see that quite a bit. A lot of these people don't want to change, right? It's the same thing about a light bulb, right? How many people does it take to change a light bulb? One. But the light bulb has to want to change. And so, that's really what you guys are dealing with. So, but that's an important part as well, is that executive accountability element.
So, interestingly enough, as we've had this conversation, you've noticed that I've had some challenges of when I am the consultant versus when I'm an Epicor employee and back and forth. Eric does a really good job of saying we, right? So, I'm going to ask Eric a question and then John, which is, if you were giving advice to Epicor, their sales team, our implementation teams, etc., what's the number one thing that we should walk out of this room with? We as an Epicor employee, what we, yes, exactly, we should be taken from this.
We.
Exactly, we.
You're this
Yes,
team.
yeah.
Well, I'd say, just look at the strengths of what you're doing well and do more of it and double down on it. I'd look at the industry focus that not only the products have, but the people selling the products seem to really know and speak the language of manufacturing, distribution, and retail. And continuing to do that, and as the company grows and scales, resisting that temptation to potentially do what NetSuite does, for example, and just go hire a bunch of really cheap junior resources that can go out and sell more software. If I compare, and I don't want to pick just on one vendor here, if I compare NetSuite sales reps as a generalization to Epicor sales reps, it's just, you can't even compare the two, because Epicor can speak the language, they can talk the talk, they've been there before in many cases, they've been on the shop floor, they understand how it works, and then you get a kid out of college that just is taught how to sell software.
Yeah, can't spell the ERP.
Yeah, they can't spell ERP, they don't know what MRP means.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They've never been on a shop floor, that sort of thing. So I think just really doubling down on that and continuing to hire these people that really know and speak the language of the industries you guys serve. I think that's the good news of being a niche solution or a niche provider, is you don't have to do everything to everyone. You can really double down on that focus.
Sage advice, sir, sage advice. John, you have to follow that.
Yeah, it's a tough act to follow. Look, if we reflect on what Epicor does really well, your SEs, your demonstrations are top notch. Your willingness to align executives is key. And even though we try to help our clients make dispassionate decisions, it's still an emotional decision. And so my advice is come in exceptionally well prepared. That first impression is so important. You have access to the tools that Lynn has. You now have a facility to build out an integrated playbook and organizational map in Salesforce, and you have access to the work that Third Stage and Pemico does in advance. Use us, call us, understand what the key drivers are, and hit the ground running, and really show that this is about them. And if you make the process about them, the tools are just the facilitation, and so it's important, it's what you're selling, that almost follows naturally.
How do we do at the CFO level? And I'm going to scroll through the tools so you all have a chance to look at what's available to you, but obviously, and Lynn Harding can help with all of these, in addition to the rest of the strategic and influencer team. So I'm going to scroll through, but answer the question, how do we do it with the CFO?
I think fairly well. I'd say you probably do better with the COO.
Yeah, the operations guy for sure, yep.
The CFO could, a lot of times will follow the lead of the COO, especially in a manufacturing environment. So you want to have that sort of minimum level of functionality to make the CFO happy, of course. But I think the real strength is going to be selling the COO. In most cases, that's broad generalization. Of course, you have to understand the politics and the influence within the organization, but in general, that's what we see.
lose.
I think that's a really good observation. I think, when we talk about Epicor, we talk about Kinetic and the core capabilities in manufacturing. You're speaking to the operations department, and in order to make the case compelling to the CFO, yes, you have you have the table stakes on the financial modules and things like that, but it's really going to be on the ROI. It's going to be on the waste reduction. It's going to be on the business process efficiency.
Yeah, we've kind of commoditized the feature functionality of the finance tool of ERP, right? And so there's not as much differentiation between them as there used to be. And so since that, the CFO is kind of a back seat to the COO in a lot of cases. The majority of the Epicor-related implementations, the chief sponsor on the client side was the COO. When I have a CFO-led selection process, it's usually to another tool because they're looking for something specific.
And now with AI too, I think that sort of takes some of the pressure off having to create the perfect dashboard or BI tools for the CFO. And now with AI tools, it's making it easier for the CFO to get what they want when they want it.
100%.
And the other thing too, I wanted to mention, some of you are in this session, we're currently piloting Prolific, which is an account management tool that is fully integrated with Salesforce. So many of the things that they were talking about early on, and like how long have they had a digital footprint, or how digital forward are they? All that stuff can be captured in Prolific. And then that can be your kind of lifetime document, which is super important because you can also come back to the influencers. The relationship doesn't need to end with the actual selection. It can be an ongoing conversation because candidly, if we're successful, if the influencer has, it comes to an Epicor conclusion, they're going to continue to go back to that influencer and say, well, and now here's what I've got, and now this is my next challenge. So you can always continue to vet things and develop things out. Like you were talking about, yes, you might be interested in TMS, but really, how about you do that in a couple years? That can be in Prolific, and you can also continue to use them as your virtual team. The other thing too, we'll continue to talk about this, but as you know, both John and Third Stage, as well as two others, can also help you get people to understand the business value of cloud. Eric asked me in a few fleeting moments, do you really think cloud benefits the customer anymore? And I actually said for the first time in my life, I would say yes. Having evangelized cloud since my days at SAP, which was like a million years ago, yes, because not only is there the cybersecurity and security, but also too, so many other applications are cloud ready and are in the cloud, not even cloud ready, that they're going to limit themselves in tools. But that's my take. What do you guys think?
Well, you had a long feedback on this online. I think you had about 40 minutes of your thoughts on cloud, right?
Yeah. And sometimes I'm contrarian on this, but I do think, that first of all, if I back up, you have to recognize that cloud is benefiting vendors more than anyone, at least for now. But it's starting to benefit customers more and more, especially as more and more apps are cloud ready, and as organizations look to more standard business processes, they look to AI and being able to pull better data out of the systems. Cybersecurity, you mentioned, all that stuff is really enabled by cloud, but it's just now that I think a lot of vendors, not necessarily Epicor, but other vendors are just getting caught up and getting migrated to cloud to where they actually have a mature cloud offering. In the past with the on-prem stuff, that stuff was mature, but it just wasn't in the cloud, and so during that transition phase, it's been a bit awkward for some of them.
No, and it absolutely has, in part being we have visitors here. But I think this contrarian approach is important. But Third Stage could be your virtual selling team on trying to get some of these people migrated, because if they're not in the cloud, they're also probably on older versions, and that's going to limit them as well. John, do you want to address that too?
Yeah, if we think of the market kind of in two, you've got the small mid-sized business and you've got the enterprise-sized business. The small mid-sized business realistically doesn't want to deploy the resources to maintaining server infrastructure and systems administration and database administration and all of that stuff, because what it's doing is it's taking their focus away from deploying their limited resources to business process improvements. They've got finite kind of dollars. So I do think there's a value for smaller to mid-sized businesses there. On the enterprise side, we have two clients, roughly around $1 billion, that got taken down to their knees by massive cybersecurity incidents. Both clients had IT departments of 30 to 50. They knew what they were doing. They were managing large data centers, and they lost millions and millions of dollars. And that was a big driver for them to move to the cloud. So part of the calculus was, yeah, we can deploy patches and updates more quickly. But it was also the redundancy, the business continuity, and the disaster recovery. You hope that you never have to go there. It's a statistic, like 50 to 70% of manufacturing companies get hit with a cyber event, and there's a huge percentage who don't even know that they've been infiltrated. So I think there's big value in the cloud.
Yeah, so both of them are participants in the Statue of Liberty program that's still alive and well, and we look forward to working with you on it. But are any parting thoughts? So we hope this session was valuable for you guys. I mean, anything? No?
I'd say, my closing advice would be what I said earlier, just to reiterate, just to stay focused on what you're good at, the industry focus, and keep doing that and focus more. To Jonathan's point, I think you gave a really good overview, a nice overview of what they can be doing different from the services side to round out and complete the service offering. You mentioned it too, Will, so I think those are the two big takeaways I have from it.
How about you, Jim?
Stay focused on the strategic drivers, write them down, understand what's going to move the needle for the key decision makers, and articulate your story that way from beginning to end.
And then, oh yeah, thank you very much. Yes, I was going to say, we also have a data analyst to help you capture those PE portfolios, get that into Salesforce so that you can actually see all that. You saw Salesforce as a single source of truth. So I just want to make sure that we're working on that. If you are coming up against a new PE, just let us know and we'll fill in the entire portfolio for you. And it's amazing how you might find somebody on the DocStar team has called on it, but that's leverage and that works. And now you're a trusted partner versus a net new vendor. So yeah, there's a lot of way to synergy. So yes, thank you very much. I appreciate you all attending.
Thank you all.